Hi, and welcome back to our Holy Week series. I hope you have had a great Wednesday so far and a great week. We're so glad you're joining us. So we've been following what the Gospel of Mark tells us about the last week of Jesus' ministry before Easter, and we're now in Jerusalem, and that's where we'll be the rest of this week. Jesus and his disciples are gathered in Jerusalem, and they're there to celebrate the festival of unleavened bread and Passover, and we're only a couple days from the beginning. And if you'd like to read more about how that festival got started, you can check it out in Exodus 12. But Jesus has been teaching in the temple in Jerusalem, and again, there's tons of Jews from all over the known world preparing for the festival. And he's been disrupting the status quo and has made some enemies. Mark 14 tells us that now the chief priests and the scribes are looking for a treacherous way to arrest and kill him, but not during the festival, they said, or there may be rioting among the people. And so at verse 3 it says what happens next. They're now in a nearby town of Bethany where Jesus and the disciples have been staying all week, and they're gathered around for a meal at Simon's house. Mark also tells us Simon has a serious skin disease, but we'll touch more on that in a minute. They're eating dinner when a woman comes in, brings a valuable jar of oil, breaks it open, pours it on Jesus' head, and anoints him. And so it says some of the disciples and those at dinner start to protest. They get irate, saying the jar of oil could have gotten as much as $300 and the money could have been given to the poor. But Jesus stops and he says something peculiar. You see, over this week and throughout his ministry, he's been telling them and preparing them all because he knows of his approaching death. But by now, the hints aren't even that subtle. So Jesus says she's done a noble thing, and she's preparing Jesus for burial. And then Mark tells us that Judas, one of the disciples, heads back to Jerusalem that evening and meets with the chief priests and agrees to hand Jesus over to him. And when they hear this, they're glad and they promise to pay him well. And so Judas starts looking for his chance to betray Jesus. Now we get some more glimpses from some of the other Gospels and commentaries about Judas. He handled the finances for the disciples while they were traveling, and he'd previously been a member of a group of zealots who were hoping for a leader who'd help them overthrow the Roman occupation. And he's also been offended by some of Jesus' teaching, and it seems like this might have been the last straw. It's hard for us to know the full picture of why Judas would even choose to betray Jesus, a man he's trusted, a teacher he'd followed the previous 2 to 3 years. But it does seem that he's starting to realize Jesus isn't who he thought he'd be. Judas was most likely looking for and hoping for a military leader, trying to be in the inner circle, someone who'd stir up an army to kick out the Romans, but he'd been following the man many would call the Prince of Peace. Jesus is the man who rides triumphantly into Jerusalem that Sunday 3 days earlier on the back of a donkey, humbly. He heals sick and lame people. He makes room at the table for sinners and even unclean people like Simon, who's hosting the meal. We often miss out on who Jesus really is and was because our own preconceived notions and desires get in the way. See, often we want a Jesus that reflects our own feelings about people, but eventually we'll find out that Jesus is completely outside our own desires. Jesus, on one hand, brings judgment for religious people and grace to sinners. He pushes back against teachers of the law for knowing the letters of the law but missing the heart. He comes and is the guest of Simon, also known as Simon the leper. And this is a man who would have had to constantly warn people that he was unclean so he wouldn't infect them, often having to shout through the streets. He most likely lived alone, would have had no visitors, and Jesus is at his home. You see, Jesus comes close to people who have been pushed away their entire lives. He comes close to sinners, and he includes people at the table that religious leaders don't want there. He doesn't fit into our convenient boxes. I pray that we don't miss him like Judas by expecting him to fit into our neat, convenient little boxes. But may we see Jesus for who he really is. So thanks so much for taking a portion of your Wednesday to be with us. It means a lot. Please join us tomorrow and we'll continue with what happens next in the story. I hope you have a great Wednesday and a great Holy Week. And if you're in the Birmingham area and you don't have a church home, I'd love for you to be our guest here at Hueytown First Methodist. We're launching a new series this Easter Sunday called Bounce Back, and we'd love to have you join us. We have a traditional service at 10 a.m. and our new Thrive Modern Worship service at 11 every week. And for more information on what you can expect, check us out online at hueytownfirst.com. We're on Facebook at Hueytown First UMC and Instagram as Hueytown UMC. Have a great day, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.